Okay, so for the past few days, some people in the community have been discussing whether Nami, the leader card, is a bad design or is it a well-designed card. Some people have said that the card is toxic, things like that. I wanted to talk about a little bit about that. Why I personally think that Nami is a badly designed leader. At the very least, the way the deck plays right now, I think is. I'll delve into it deeper further into the video, but I personally think that the way the deck plays right now, it fosters sort of like an unhealthy type of gameplay. But I'll debate that more specifically further along in the video. But yeah, I think that it's fine. Like, not every leader is going to be a slam dunk, and I think Nami, for first attempt at an alternate win condition leader, at the very least, is a brave design. So I guess I'll leave it at that. But without further ado, first of all, I want to point out, this is just my opinion. It's perfectly fine to like Nami. I personally think that I don't like Nami or playing against Nami. But if you like playing Nami or if you like playing against Nami, it's perfectly okay. And I also wanted to clarify that I think alternate win conditions, whether they be explicit throughout the way, sort of like the way Nami is written, where you explicitly win the game if it's stated on the card, or cards that promote different gameplay styles that are specific to a specific leader, sort of like Rebecca or something like that, are good for the game. So yeah, I guess this is sort of like please don't attack me if you are a Nami lover. I also wanted to point out that I think there are some bad arguments to say Nami is a bad design or a badly designed card. I've seen some people say, well, the deck is too good, like the leader is poorly designed. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's more of a balance issue. I don't really like to correlate things that are badly designed with things that are too good, mostly because if you make a correlation, the opposite sort of, you would assume that the opposite is true. So suddenly a leader that's very badly designed or that promotes unhealthy gameplay suddenly becomes good design if it's not good enough to like be the centralizing force in the meta. I also wanted to point out that I think saying that takes no skill to pilot or to play is a bad argument to say that a card is poorly designed. But I also specifically wanted to clarify that I think playing Nami is very hard. I think it's a very tough deck to pilot. I think that playing it optimally is very, very hard, arguably one of the hardest decks in the game. And I also want to say that it's perfectly fine if you don't like Nami. The fact that you personally don't like Nami doesn't make the leader a badly designed card. Now, these are my arguments on why I think Nami is a bad design. I think that, well, as you can see on the screen, hopefully, the non-Nami player has very little points of interaction when you're playing against the deck. What I try to mean by this is, the way you traditionally played against Nami. I think that the current version of Nami has a lot of issues that the previous iterations of the deck didn't have. More specifically, I wanted to point out these 4 individual cards for different reasons. But the first card is Whitesnake. I mean, I guess the optimal way to play against Nami is to attack. The deck is built based on attacking. It's fine that sometimes, I'm talking in general, not specifically against Nami here, but when you design a card, you want people to play the game. The way you play this game is you play characters, you attack with them, and it's fine that sometimes you shouldn't attack with the characters because you want to keep like your 4-cost Kuzan alive, or you don't want to attack with a blocker because you want to block. But Nami punishes people for wanting to play, for attacking with their 5 attack cards, or like I've seen videos of people that play Nami and that are very good Nami players saying, oh no, the way you play against Nami is you build a huge board and you just start going for like 11k swings or 9k swings. And I agree that that is the correct way to play against Nami now. I don't think it was the correct way to play against Nami before. And I think that the card that's at fault here is Whitesnake specifically. Um, so the reason why that is that before you were able to like start like pinching the Nami player for like 5k attacks every single turn. Your leader was always a 5k attack, and Nami would always have to have burn a card in hand to counteract each specific attack. Sorry. Um, However, Whitesnake makes up for this in an incredibly efficient manner, and it actually punishes you for actually wanting to attack Nami, which I think promotes unhealthy patterns of gameplay, generally speaking. Um, so I think Whitesnake is a problematic card, specifically in the Nami deck. Also, I think Lava Beam, to a lesser extent, also promotes some unhealthy interactions because you want to attack Nami, but oftentimes if you can't pull through the 9k threshold, you shouldn't be attacking. And I, like I said, I don't think that is that making people not want to actively do things in the game that affect the board is promoting healthy gameplay. And finally, this is more targeted at Gavel specifically, but my problem is the fact that Rubber Band and Gavel both exist, and they are both very good in the deck. So what ends up happening is that you know that if your Nami player has 2 Dawn active, you want to attack them for 9 at the very least, because they can use a 2k event like Snake Dance or Lava Beam to counter with your attack, and if you swing 9, they at least have to earn 2 cards. And logically, I guess you could say, if the Nami player has 1 Dawn active, they shouldn't be able to counter out of your 7k swing. However, the fact that both Rubber Band and Gavel exist at the same time means that if you want to swing 7, you get punished by Gavel. If you want to swing 9, you get punished oftentimes by your opponent just letting the attack go through, I guess. But if Nami lost Gavel, or if she lost at the very least Rubber Band, her plays would be a little bit more telegraphed, and you wouldn't be forced with a sort of like a position, sort of like a Gedatsu Okiku type situation with yellow, where you're forced to make a decision on whether you want to attack or not. But you get punished by 1 card if you do 1 attack, but you get punished by the other if you don't do that attack. So yes. Now, this is my main concern. Again, why I think Nami is bad design. The board bundles very little against Nami. Whatever you play, typically like on-play abilities or additional effects, I guess you could say, matter very little against Nami. Now, Seth is here for a specific reason that I will talk about in a little while, but I want you to focus on the 3 cards on the left, Brook, Revolucci, and 7-cost Ace. Now, if you look at these 3 cards, the Brook has an ability that specifically targets your opponent's trash. So you would think Brook is good against Nami, and he's decent, I guess. He's not crazy good, but he's definitely not bad. Now look at 7-cost Ace. If you played in a Whitebeard Pirates deck, you would think, well, this card is insane against Nami. It has Rush, it swings for 7, so it burns a card of Nami's life even on the turn that it hits the board. Then it swings for 7 the next turn, and the next turn, and the next turn. But the fact of the matter is that Ace is not that good against Nami either, because if you play Ace on curve, you can't swing with it, or you shouldn't at the very least, because you're essentially giving Nami the chance to freely use the counters that the Nami player might have in hand. So actually, the best card against Nami is Revolucci. Even if you just play him as a vanilla, he's just like a vanilla 4/6. And Nami runs no removal in this meta. So yeah, Revolucci is an insane card against Nami. It's arguably out of these 3 cards the best one, and I don't think that fosters any type of healthy gameplay interactions. Like when your best strategy against the deck is just drop him vanillas and curve, waiting a couple of turns and then making like a huge swing. I just think that's an indication that something is kind of going wrong with the way the deck is being played. On the other hand, Zeph, when Nami players had to play Zeph to attack you, I think Zeph was a card that sort of kept Nami in check in a way. Like when Nami players are having to run Zeph, I think that that shows that the deck is in a good spot, because Zeph is a card that you have to play it, you have to wait for a turn, and then if you get hit by the Zeph, you essentially lost the game, I guess, if Zeph hit the opponent, but that's beside the point. Um, if the Nami player has to win by attacking you at the very least, they're interacting the same axis, I guess you could say, that every deck in the game interacts with. So your removal becomes live again, like your jet pistols, your sea quakes, your whatever. Otherwise, what happens right now with the way Nami plays is Nami just pass it, like maybe plays one pilaf and then leaves like 5 Dawn open to counter out of every single one of your small attacks. And if you make an attack that's big enough, they'll let it go through. Seth, on the other hand, is a proactive card instead of a reactive card. So I think that Seth, at the very least, promoted board interactions, people to play their blockers, didn't immediately make removal dead in a game that has no sideboard and removal is plentiful. So I think that for Nami to be in a good spot, cards like Seth should be the cards that the Nami players should be wanting to play, and not like 24,000 counter cards or events that just do nothing in your hand and they just sit there and break. Now, I also think that this is a problem. This problem is not specific to Nami, the leader card, but it is specific to the support that they choose to print for Nami. The deck punishes you for trying to win. So this sort of ties into, well, the board matters very little, obviously, but this sort of ties into as well to the non-Nami player has very little points of interaction, and the conundrum I guess I talked about when talking about like Gavel plus the combination of Gavel plus Rubber Band being in the deck. So my problem with this specifically is that if you hit Nami and one of these cards pops out alive, you're in a much worse spot. And if 2 of these pop out alive and your deck is not RP Law, you're in a very tough spot, and there's no way to play around these cards, and there's no way for the Nami player to play around these cards except like periodically checking trash. I think the obvious problem child here is Impel Down All Stars, which is just a do nothing card that if you have it on your life in some matchups it's win the game, but then the rest of the time it does nothing. But obviously Desert Spada and Sanji's Pilaf have the same issue, I guess. So the problem with these cards is that there's literally no way to play around them. At the very least with yellow events, what makes them problematic is the combination of a lot of yellow triggers having different effects that you have to play around in different ways. So the way you play around, like, I don't know, Bege is you want to swing with your stronger characters, I guess, earlier, but the way you play against like Sanji Blocker or Brule or something like that is to not do that. Or I guess it's a little bit better exemplified by like Gadatsu plus Okiku, but with these 3 cards, there's just no playing around it. If you're the Nami player, you just want them to be in the live always. If you're the non-Nami player, you never want these cards to be in live. You can't distribute your cards differently to attack differently in order to pop the cards in a different order. It just doesn't matter. And the way you win the game if you're the non-Nami player is by attacking the Nami player. So this just sort of the deck sort of punishes you for actively trying to get to your win condition. And I just think that is poor game design in general. And then I think it's very obvious that Nami limits card design for blue. The fact that generic blue support is few and far between, I guess, would be the most obvious example. But these 3 cards, I think, I just picked these at random. There's a lot more cards that have been affected by Nami, but blue is just not allowed to draw on trash anymore. And if you look at the earlier sets in the game, it was sort of like blue's whole identity was like they drew cards and they trashed cards. So like card filtering in a way. And drawing and putting cards in the bottom of the deck is fine as well. I don't care. It's pretty much the same effect. But the fact that the color is not allowed to do this at all is pretty crazy. Also, blue card draw has to be leader locked pretty much from now up until forever, or until they ban the leader, or until Nami rotates out of the format, or whatever Bandai decides to do with it. But I think that just shows that the card is not properly designed, I guess. Logtown. I don't know how the name of the town is pronounced, by like the stage card that's in the middle is the most egregious example, I guess. Like the effect could just as easily would be a lot cleaner on the design if you just trashed the card and trash a card from your hand and drew two, but you cannot do that because Nami exists. So yeah, same thing goes for Guzan. Like card advantage in blue is very limited. I mean, card advantage in the game in general is very limited. Don't get me wrong, but blue is the color that supposedly, I guess, has the generic card draw effects, and because Nami exists in the game, generic card draw effects have to either be terribly bad, extremely expensive, or tied to like all these complicated things, and it's not good design to limit card space in such a way early on in the game. And I also think it's not good design that if you have to lead or lock every single good ability. Now, I also think that there's so this is sort of like a minor problem I have, but self-milling yourself is a lot less interactive than milling your opponent. Like if you look at Magic, which I have seen some people use as an example of why milling is a good thing to have in the game. And I agree. I think milling is a good thing to have in the game. And like I said earlier, I think it's good for the game to have alternate win conditions or decks that play differently. But I think self-milling is just harder to interact with, because not every deck, or maybe even like very few decks, have cards that interact with your opponent's trash. It's pretty much just black. But even then, even in the subset of black cards in this game, in One Piece, very little black cards interact with your opponent's graveyard, and with your own, with your opponent's graveyard. Now, in Magic, at the very least, cards, I guess Reanimate technically targets your opponent's graveyard as well if you want, but the idea in Magic is that Millstone, for example, which is the card that I have there, in other games, the way you win by milling, it's not by self-milling yourself, it's by milling your opponent. And if you mill your opponent knows what they have in their deck, and you don't. So you don't know what's left in your deck, and in what order, like the order of the cards that are left in your deck. Your searchers don't immediately become ways to bump the cards that you haven't seen up to the top so that you can mill them. So if you're the mill player, you're playing with a lot less information than if you're playing Nami, if you're playing mill in a different game. And also, your opponent has more ways to interact with their own trash than they have ways to interact with your own trash. So, milling becomes more of a battle of information thing in this game, where you know everything you have in your deck and the order of the cards and things like that, which I think is one of the things that makes Nami very skillful as a deck to pilot, but I think that it makes it very hard to play against, or very unfun, very annoying, and very difficult to interact with, which is my specific point here. So yeah, there's on the bottom hand, you have Millstone, the card that where the term milling originates from. You can see you take the top two cards from target player's library. So the way you would do this in Magic is you would mill your opponent's deck, because when you can't, you have to draw a card and you have no more cards in deck. In Magic, you lose. This is also during One Piece. However, there's very little cards that interact with your opponent's deck. Actually, I think there are no cards that mill your opponent. So yeah. Also, and this is a point that I wanted to make because I think it's very important. Other games, and here I choose Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh as examples. What I mean by hat systems that allow for better counterplay to mill. When I say that, what I mean is in Magic, if you play like a 1-drop, it takes, let's say your 1-drop has 2 power, which is a low number. You take 10 turns to kill your opponent attacking with your 1-drop. But if you play a 5-drop that attacks for 10 damage, you take 2 attacks to kill your opponent. Therefore, you can win the game in 2 attacks. If you turbo into a card, like if you ramp, sort of like a Purple does in One Piece, you can play the card earlier. There's a million different cards in Magic that do a million different things. But my point is that the way the resource, the life system works in Magic and in Yu-Gi-Oh, where you have life points, allows for a variable amount of attacks that you have to make in order to win the game. In One Piece, you have life, and therefore, if you want to win against Nami, even if you have double attackers, you have to give your opponent 5 extra cards and then take another swing, and that swing has to connect. And most of the times, unless you're playing like some crazy deck that has a double attacker, which is certainly not a thing that's in the meta right now, or you're playing Yamato, you will have to attack the Nami player at the very least a minimum of 6 times, even if you're swinging with like a huge attack. And this makes attacking a lot more difficult, and this makes big attackers or waiting until you can attack for a big number a lot harder and a lot worse. And this is obviously my personal opinion, but the hypothetical Nami meta where Nami is the best deck and Nami is the centralizing force that makes the meta game play around it, and it doesn't play around the meta, is pretty goddamn boring. I think it would suck. Nami mirrors, they take too long. Nobody's attacking the other player. At the very least, from my limited experience on it. But obviously, I can be wrong with that because I'm not a very, very good Nami player. But the way you have to tag your deck to play into Nami, and the way Nami plays with other Nami decks, at the very least right now, I think it just promotes non-interactive gameplay, and I think that is that is something that I wouldn't call good game design. Please don't blame me. This is just my opinion, but I would love to have to talk to other people that like the deck and that think I'm wrong, or people that think that have different opinions than I do. I think game design is very, very interesting to talk about, on card game design especially. So I hope you don't hate this video, or you don't hate me for making this video, and I'll see you soon.